You're watching the Weather Channel, your most accurate and dependable source of weather information, 24 hours a day.
Hey, good evening. You're watching the Weather Channel here on a Friday evening.
I would love to be able to say that it's going to be a killer, awesome day, but it won't be. It's just too nice out right now to be okay with sitting inside in an office. Look at this. God, that thing is big. I get a lot of messages with either questions or just kind of like comments sent to me in a myriad of places that I sort of guiltily don't really get around to answering all of. Easily my worst offender for lack of replies would be email, next would be Facebook, and then rounding out number 3 would be Instagram. That's normally where all communique goes through. I don't mean to not reply. Sometimes I'll like come back to it 2 or 3 weeks later and I'll just kind of feel weird about answering, so I just do nothing. This part of today's vlog, it comes from an email that I didn't answer, mostly because it sort of stumped me and I had to take a lot of time to think about what the answer possibly could be. The premise was about why someone was having such a hard time riding hands-free these days on newer bikes versus the bikes they used to ride and the amount of hands-free, effortless riding they used to do in the past. While I was originally reading through it, my mind immediately went to, well, the head tube angles are probably different, the trail of the fork is probably different, so it's going to feel a little different in the front end, and that's why you're not really able to ride no-handed anymore. But in the body of the email, he sort of addressed that he had done his research, had looked up all of the trail, the head tube angle, the rake of his forks, and it seemed like they were kind of in line with where he wanted them to be. I'm sure there's probably some differences in the way of head tube angles. Like a more modern bike would definitely have some different geometry in the steering department. Probably not enough on its own to make riding with no hands that much more difficult. The next point that was made in the body of the paragraph was, am I just getting too old or is my balance gone? And I don't necessarily think that's really the problem either. I would discount that right away. I think I have some insight, but I can't guarantee that they're accurate or correct. So I think my experience might be like a little bit unique because I do get to ride such a plethora of different bikes on different days, typically doing very, very similar tasks. That is to say, vlogging on my way to and from work or on rides in one way or another, whether it's a mountain bike, whether it's my tractor cross bike, whether it's my Cinelli, whether it's my road bike, whether it is, I don't know, what are the bike? My cross bike. They all have, save for the mountain bike, very similar shapes, but the geometries differ on them enough to make sure that they are different bikes. So I am sort of drawing on that experience to determine this conclusion herein. I think 2 big factors that could be overlooked when thinking about this would be seat tube angle and bottom bracket height. Between my bikes that have steeper seat tube angles and higher bottom brackets, they are definitely twitchier and harder to handle without hands on the handlebars. I mean, even putting the effort in right now to sit further back on this seat or further forward, you could feel which one's gonna make you wanna fall. So sort of drawing on memory and anecdotal thoughts here, most older bikes typically have a much more slack and laid back seat tube angle. And depending on what kind of bike that you rode all the time, I would sort of expect most of them to have lower, more stable bottom bracket heights. And in my opinion and experience, if you were going from a bike that was very stable with that more laid back seat post that did make it easy to sort of handle the extra movements, riding a bike with no hands and jumping into a more modern, steeper bike and taking in the effects of a different head tube angle, different trail than you'd be used to, then yeah, things would be a little more tough to ride with no hands. And then from there, a really important aspect of being able to control the bike without any hands on is having a properly adjusted and maintained headset. If your headset's tight or has become indexed and pitted, then it probably will lock into where it wants to be and not drift the places that it should to stay stable. So just check your headset. Make sure that it is running smoothly and it's not over tight. Because if it wants to track straight all the time and you're having a hard time turning it, that's going to affect the way things handle too. My recommendation, move your seat back on the rails a little bit and just see if that makes any difference for stability. Also, let me know if it works. Sorry I didn't answer sooner. Angela always likes to give me a hard time about all of the things I hold on to for just unbelievable amounts of time, rightfully bringing up the fact that I like to keep things just in case I have an idea for a project or just in case we need it. But this week she did tag me in these like homemade 2x4 lawn deck chairs that looked kind of cool. Normally I go, that's cool. It'd be cool to build that and then forget about it. This time I'm actually just going to use up some of the stuff that I've kept beside the shed that used to be in here and see if we can't make some of these things. So I wish I could say these were a surprise, but obviously it's kind of hard to hide the sound of a miter saw making cuts, so Angela came out and sanded and stained the first one already. It is fun to see the difference between the two though. This is the old beat up 2x4s that are like random cutoffs that are split and terrible, but that's okay. Sort of sitting beside the shed or in that big tall shed there from the previous owners of the house, and with like a little bit of cutting and thought and following a pattern that you find on the internet and then sanding and staining, you have one of these. It almost looks like a tire. I'm more than remarkably proud of what I've just achieved here. Strong realization that I had while doing this, it's that working with wood, far more forgiving and far less tight of tolerance than dealing with anything on one of these or these or any of these. Actually, this is pretty similar. Same with this. Okay, that's today's vlog.